Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode number 267 of the Board Game Barrage podcast. I am your favorite host, Neil in the Orange Tank, and with me, as always, are your least favorite hosts, Order Undetermined, Mark the Green Tank, and Kellen the Red Tank. Say hello.
It's a controversial take.
It is.
I have all the data, so I
true.
feel like I'm in a good position to be authoritative on the subject.
He's making it seem like we didn't just let him host this episode by the grace of us just prior to this when he said, "Oh, Kellen and Mark, can I host the episode, please?"
Yep. The reason I'm hosting the episode is because I do, in fact, hold all the data. We have everyone's entries for the listener top 20. I have spent literal hours compiling all of this. It always takes me so much longer than I remember it does. But yeah, we're going to have the list, the top 20 list. There's some fun changes there, which I'm excited to have you all guessing about as we
Dozens
get through
of people. We were combing through dozens of people's data, right?
Exactly. Dozens and dozens and dozens of people. That is all coming up later in the episode, though, when we look at everyone's submissions. Before we get there, though, we're going to be talking about some of the games that we've been playing this week. And this week on the show, Kellen will be telling us about Tower of Babel? Babel?
We don't know how to pronounce that.
Who can say?
Speaking of God, right in the Bible.
Exactly. Biblical episode. Yeah. I'm going to be telling us a little bit about my play of Great Western Trail Argentina. And then Mark's going to be telling us about Jump Drive. So let's kick it off with Kellen.
So look, I could spend 20 minutes like Mark would talking about the etymology of this game, the origins, the year it came out, what it's been re-implemented as, but nobody cares, okay? So we're going to go straight to the gameplay. Tower of Babel or Babel, depending on who you ask, and I think one of those pronunciations is only if you ask me, is a Reiner Knizia area majority / auction game that has light negotiation in it. It came out a long time ago in 2005. I believe there was another version of it that came out with a space theme called Planet Rush 2016. Not quite as well received, perhaps. And Tower of Babel, wait, which is the actual pronunciation? Sorry. Tower.
I think both actually are fine.
Yeah, in my very limited Googling, I couldn't get an answer.
All right.
Like Babel, because it's the root of like when you are saying something that doesn't make any sense, babble.
Right, so you would know.
You ever read your Bible, Kellen?
Excuse me. You're going to ask me that question? Okay, first of all, Nealon has already been smited with his like God Donut Santa Claus thing. Second of all, I attended 4 years of seminary daily. Okay?
4 years daily, okay.
4 years every day.
Don't come at me with that. And in this game, I don't want to bury the lead here. This is a really interesting old Reiner Knizia game that I would not be surprised if some dentists / publishers attempt to reboot this in the future. In this game, you are building the 7 wonders of the world, and you are doing so by picking a site on your turn. There are 4 suits. You say, I need 5 ships, right? And then everyone at the table offers how many ships in the form of cards that they're willing to put up for that building. And every ship that someone offers you could become an area control on that space. So let's say I have 3 ships in my hand. Nealon offers 2. Christina offers 2. I'm like, okay, I pick Nealon. So I will get 3 area control tokens on the space. Nealon will get 2. And Christina will get nothing in the form of area control. Okay, but Christina will get victory points per card that she offered that could have been used to build, but was not used. So you're continually making these offers where you don't want to accept their offer and you don't want to refuse their offer because they're getting victory points. They're either going to be advancing their area control needs or they're going to be getting victory points. Very intriguing. Each Wonder of the World has 3 build actions that can happen at that site before it scores, and there is no sort of explicit value for each wonder. As each wonder scores, you get more and more for having the most in that region or the second most in that region, meaning if you have a lot invested, you kind of want to wait till the end of the game in order for that one to score, except once one of the 4 resources is out that are face up, the game ends immediately. So there's a lot of tension at the end of the game. The other sort of main thing here is that the player whose turn it is that successfully completes that part of the build, either by playing all their own cards or by using everyone else's cards, gets a little token. And there is, at the end of the game, bonus points up to 20 points, which is a lot if you have 4 of that type. So it would be camels or ships or whatever else the bad resources are in this badly themed and beige-looking game. The other thing that you can offer on a trade is 1 poison chalice. It's a trading card, which is saying, hey, instead of taking my area control tokens, I want the little token for the end of game scoring. And so in that case, you don't get victory points if you offer that up because it's sort of like a poison deal, so to speak. So the entire game happens. It's one of tempo. It's one of card management. And it's really odd and really quite good. Really quite good. Very, very intriguing and unclear how you do well in the game, because is it by putting up a bunch of offers and then getting them rejected so you score points, or is it by always offering just enough to be a part of the area control? I thought this worked shockingly well at 3 players. I hear it's even better at 4, and by here I mean BGG tells me it's best at 4. So I would love to get another game in of this. Neelan, what did you think of Tower of Babel / Babel / you God-fearing man, you?
Well, the thing I noted as we were playing it, which is still sticking with me, that it is quite reminiscent in a few ways of Taj Mahal, which, is my favorite Reiner Knizia game. So that's already, even if you're evoking something Taj Mahal adjacent, that's very good as far as I'm concerned. What it kind of takes away from Taj Mahal is the idea of a spatial puzzle, as it were, as to where you're placing things out. And it kind of dilutes that down to kind of just pure 3-pronged scoring, right? Are you going to go hard on the area control? Are you going to go hard on just offering good deals? Are you going to get your immediate points? Are you going to try go for those set collection on the tokens? And then what it layers on top of that as well, which is something that isn't in Taj Mahal, because Taj Mahal always plays all allotments. You see the entire flow of the game and you play through all of it, is that in-game tension, like not knowing exactly when it's going to end and seeing the possibilities of, oh wow, someone could end it this round, and am I in a good position for it to end now? Because one of the things that is quite clever, which you didn't mention, Kellen, is if the game ends, every area does score, but at a very reduced rate. So there is this impetus to say, like, no, I need this to score before the game ends because I'm very invested in this thing, and it's currently worth a lot more points than if the game were to end, and it would be worth maybe half as much. So there is so much tension riding on that. Who is winning? Are they going to try finish it? Like in our game, we got to the position where Christina quite comfortably felt like she was in a good position to win, and that was a lot of the tension from her front was, do I end it now? Because I feel like I have it, but if I let the game go on much longer, is anyone else able to steal it from me? And I loved that. I love that about it.
Yep. I think like first blush, and right, it is totally first blush. I will stay with that. It's like solid like 8 for me because it's so weird. It's just so unconventional in what you're doing and how you try to score, but I'm curious how this will net out. We also caveat there are action cards in the game, and we did not play with them. Reiner Knizia does not condone them. I guess they were added against his will. So there's another little fun fact about him. I can spit history just as well as anyone. I'm not saying who. I can spit history as well as I could say up there with anyone.
So why do you think this game didn't catch on? Because this is the first I think I'm hearing of it. You've mentioned that it's quite drab looking, and it is quite drab looking, but is it maybe like just how opaque it is? You guys seem like after the first play that you were just sort of understanding the best ways to play it, sort of hard to grasp.
Yeah, it's weird, and there's a little bit too much probably luck for some Euros, right? Because you're drawing cards every turn, and you are really restricted by what your cards are giving you. So like Neelan failed in this game. Let me just say Neelan failed.
Didn't have to tell me. Didn't have to tell me to be
that dramatic.
But he just kept, it's like a special exception, right, in the rule book where it's like, what if you can't get the amount of cards that you need to build something? And that happened to Neelan like 7 times. Okay. Let me just say the next person that happened to twice. Okay. Neelan is special exception over and over again for Neelan in this game. And I stopped in the game and I said to him, I think you're playing it strategically, that is in fact the disc that you need the most right now, but you're like not looking at your cards and being like, tactically, can I do this? He like kept missing on that little Charlie Brown with the football was Neelan there. And so I don't know. It's also awkward. There's parts of it that are just awkward. Like the rules are it's confusing, but simple, right? It's not like it's not hard. So this has always been one that I see on like geek lists of like underrated gems, or like I just keep seeing it coming up like, oh, things Kellen might like. And so I just always have wanted to have it. And so I bought it and I played it and it's good. And now you should play it.
Nice.
What do you think about that?
I think I want to try it.
That's right. And that is the Tower of Babel. Babel Fish?
Babel Fit.
By the only true and living Dr. Reiner Knizia. Actually, even that only true and living is going to get me in trouble with the big man. But let's move on.
But wait, Kellen, it's the Tower of Babel or?
Oh, yeah. This is great. Or Why the Eighth Wonder Was Never Built. Written on the cover. Yeah, it's on the cover. That's the title. ... Or Why the Eighth Wonder Was Never Built.
Why is that not on BGG?
I know. We should. You can submit a correction, Mark, now that you're...
Yeah, now that I'm Mr. Editing BGG guy. Yeah, I definitely will.
Do it.
Okay, I got the chance to play Great Western Trail Argentina. This is a new release in what is going to become, I suppose, like the Great Western Trail franchise, as it were, or trilogy of games. Yeah, coming to theaters near you next year. This is by Alexander Pfister. Great Western Trail is like a much beloved heavy Euro game. So this follows on the release of the second edition, where these kind of all start to look visually a lot more appealing and kind of like feel more cohesively connected in that sense. But every game is set in a completely different country and has some changes to the rules and structure of them. I kind of want to say right off the bat that this is still, I would estimate, like 80 to 90% Great Western Trail. It is not a dramatically different game in any sense.
Also, the Marvel mold.
You're right. Thank you. And I think that it becomes now important to frame how I feel about Great Western Trail, which is to say that my feelings have kind of declined over time. I have one fundamental problem that I don't know, it never got necessarily addressed in Argentina, which is to say that there are 3 basic routes that you have to pursue in Great Western Trail, whether you're playing the cow game, where you're moving around the track selling your cows, or you're playing the train game, or you're playing the building game, where you're putting buildings out onto the track. And the thing I have found repeatedly in Great Western Trail is that the game really wants you to specialize on one of those professions. Like, it seems incredibly hard. I might be wrong about this, but it's seemed incredibly hard for me to like dabble even in 2 of them. And that's something I just found personally frustrating. Argentina takes some steps to address this, but they're very mild. So let's talk about some of the changes here. So besides the game being set in a completely different location, which is almost entirely thematic, the main changes happen in the way that deliveries happen. So if you remember Great Western Trail, you sort of have your hand of cow cards, you're moving through the route until you get to Kansas City, and there you deliver your cattle. The way that now is different in Argentina is that whole delivery process now has an extra layer added to it. Instead of delivering directly to another city, you now deliver to a ship. These ships are lined up on the side of the board in 3 different colors, indicating 3 different foreign cities that they're eventually traveling to. But you deliver them to the ships, and then later in the game, those ships will depart to those cities. Then, one of the other steps you can take in the delivery thing is once you have your disc on that city, you can kind of move it down into a quadrant of the city in order to score bigger and smaller rewards. So it's kind of like this 2-stage process that right off the bat, I kind of just felt like was adding a layer of complexity that didn't need to be there. Second to all of this is there is now a new resource called grain. And you need grain to get your stuff onto the ships, and you need grain to get your discs from the cities into like a scoring quadrant. And grain is actually, in the game I played at least, a fairly hard to come by resource. It's entirely added to the structure of the game and supported by a new worker type. So instead of just having cowboys and engineers and builders, you now have a 4th worker, farmers. These sort of entirely take the place of like the bandits and the hazards. So instead of having bandits, instead of having hazards, those are now all farmers. And anytime that you could take one of those off the board, you can now recruit it onto your player board in order to increase the rate at which you get grain. But I still found grain incredibly hard to come by in a way that made the whole thing feel very restrictive, especially in the light of, okay, I need grain to deliver this onto a ship, and then I need grain to deliver it again.
So you're saying you're anti-grain, anti-farmer, and anti-ship.
And anti-Argentina.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh yeah, and above all, anti-Argentina.
Anti-Argentina. One of the other changes that is made to the game that I did like, and where you start to see the feedback that they're starting to integrate between some of the strategies, is if you're able to progress your train far enough along the track, you can actually get an earlier exit out of the route to delivery. So there's a little bit of like synergy between those tracks there, but they still felt mostly disconnected from each other in terms of scoring potential. It still kind of felt like you really had to go hard down one avenue. Overall, I would say that this kind of feels very substantially more like an expansion or a variant to the original. And I think your mileage is largely going to depend on where you're at with Great Western Trail as a game, right? Like, if you love Great Western Trail, this is your absolute favorite games, you've played it to death, 100%. I couldn't recommend Argentina more. You're going to want that sort of slightly bolted on complexity, some more things to do, some more interactions, just some more tweaks to the formula. If you have never played a Great Western Trail game before, I don't think there's any scenario where I would recommend this as the one to go to. The second edition is there. It's great. It's still the game that people love. And I would wholeheartedly recommend that you try that out first. So that's kind of my hot take. I kind of wish I had Mark's perspective on this, because I know you're much more of an avid GWT fan than I am.
Yeah, and some of the changes you've cited do seem interesting. I was sort of surprised, because I actually, for as much as I like Great Western Trail, I don't really know too much about Argentina, so as you were talking about, I'm sort of looking it up, and I'm surprised by how, there are some very clear differences, but I thought there'd be more, like the whole quote-unquote rondelle-esque nature of the board where you're building buildings and that's sort of making up the worker placement spots seems to be there. It seems to be quite similar to the first version.
That is definitely the part. That and the basic mechanic of collecting cows is actually almost entirely entirely unchanged. The map itself is like subtly different, but not in ways that felt like, oh, these are just like balance tweaks.
Right.
It didn't make the game feel necessarily distinctly different.
Yeah.
The buildings kind of just felt like they were variants on the buildings in the original game with some of the new mechanics layered in.
Yeah.
There is one whole system I haven't talked about a little bit, which is kind of like how you actually recruit those farmers. You have to spend the cow cards from your hand, which is like they also have like a strength associated with them, in which you're helping the farmers to bring them on board. And doing that means you sort of have to get the cows out of your hand, which is like, a double-edged sword. And there's also like an exhaustion mechanic, which is kind of like a Dominion curse of a card that just sits in your hand and can't get used the more that you're recruiting these farmers. There's stuff in there that I think that you'd find interesting if you are very, very familiar with the system. But for me, as someone that's kind of more of like a casual, maybe mislaid fan of GWT, it wasn't doing a whole lot for me.
Yeah, it seems undeniably quite a bit heavier, right?
True, yeah, exactly. It also just makes me question Maracaibo as a game that's also GWT adjacent, but heavier. If that is something I actually need to pursue at this point, I'm not convinced. But that is Great Western Trail Argentina by Alexander Pfister and Eggertspiel.
I would say Maracaibo is quite a bit different than Great Western Trail, because the big thing about Maracaibo is that there's multi-use cards. In lieu of the cows, there are cards that you can use for a lot of different things. So
it's interesting. That sounds kind of more like the sideways step maybe I was hoping for here.
And actually, the sideways step that I was more expecting when I heard this game was released. Anyhow, a couple years ago, Race for the Galaxy came out of nowhere and became not only my...
don't start, Mark.
What?
We don't need the 10-minute introduction.
Yes, you do. This is what people come for. You got to build up a backstory. You got to ease them into it, not just blaspheming like you did.
Yeah, it's like a backstory storytelling, right? Not like 20 minutes History Channel. No one cares.
These people are driving to work. They put the podcast on. They want to settle back and relax and get the background. You can't just dive in. A little foreplay. Anyhow, a couple years ago, for a long time listener, you'll remember, Race for the Galaxy came out of nowhere and became my second favorite game of all time. It has since dropped a bit, but it's not only still my top 10, it's become my most played game of all time. I basically always have a game going on BGA thanks to many wonderful listeners, currently G-Man Avalon, who I've been playing games with consistently over the last couple months. So when I heard about Jump Drive, another game by Tom Lyman, the designer of Race for the Galaxy, in the Race for the Galaxy universe, we're talking about a lot of these expanded universes in board games, I had a number of hesitations. First, I believe Jump Drive makes for the fourth game in this general system/universe, joining Race for the Galaxy, which I love, Roll for the Galaxy, which I've only played a couple times, but I haven't enjoyed as much in those limited plays, and New Frontiers, which I've also only played a couple times, but which I've enjoyed, though to much less an extent than Race for the Galaxy. Second, I've heard Jump Drive referred to as, perhaps not in these words, but as Kellen might say, babies first Race for the Galaxy. And the fact that there might be a beginner's Race for the Galaxy made a ton of sense to me. While Race is a super quick game, once you get to know it, the symbology is renowned for being a little hard to initially understand. I personally don't think it's that bad, really, and absolutely worth whatever trouble it might be. But I get that that's a complaint. So the idea that they might make an easier to understand version totally made sense. That said, at this point, I've literally played hundreds and hundreds of games of Race. So I'm not the market for what would be a beginner's Race for the Galaxy. And so I stayed away from it. This is a game that came out back in, I think, 2017. Well, now I've played it a couple times, and I can confidently say that while it is a simpler version of Race for the Galaxy, or any other game in this quote-unquote universe, Jump Drive is not, in my estimation, a beginner's version of Race for the Galaxy. It is its own game, and it's a game that I really, really enjoy. All right, I want to say that if you're a fan for Race or the other games that I've mentioned, you basically just go out and try this game immediately, especially if you've stayed away from it for the reasons I did. The reason I say this is, in addition to believing that it's a great game on its own, is that for folks that have played these games, the symbology is almost all the same, and so picking it up will be super easy for you. It took me about 15 minutes of reading the rules really quickly, and I pretty much had it understood. For those who haven't played these other games, it is an easier game than the others to understand. So it is a good introduction to the symbology of those other games. And hey, if you like Jump Drive, it'll ease you into these other 3 games. The way it works in general is that there are 2 kind of cards in your hand. And like Race, this is exclusively a card game. There's no board or anything like that. Anyway, there are 2 types of cards. These development, which are sort of like tech cards, and world cards. So you got development cards and world cards, which are the same types of cards you have in Race for the Galaxy. Your hand will be made of some combination of those 2 kinds of cards. And on your turn, you can either play 1 world card, play 1 development card, or play 1 of each. As with the other games, the cost to play the cards is a large number on the upper corner of the card, and you pay for the card that you play with other cards in your hand. So if you play a world card that says 2, that the cost is 2, you use other world and development cards in your hand to pay for it. And so the bonus for playing just 1 world card is you get a free card draw. So if you choose 1 world card, you get a free card draw. If you choose to play just 1 development card, these tech cards, you get to pay 1 less. But if you want to play 1 of each, which is your third option, you don't get a free card draw, you don't get a discount, but you do get to play 2 cards into your tableau. All the cards have an income and a victory point value. After you've played whatever cards you want to do on your turn, whatever your income is how many cards your draw is. Whatever your victory point value is how many victory points you score. And this is all cumulative. So after the first round, say my income is 1, and then I would draw 1 card. And then if I play a world or play a development that gives me a +2 income, then my next income draw is now 3 cards. It's the 1 plus the 2, which potentially allows me to play stronger cards. So maybe now I put down a +4 income card, and now in the 3rd round or 4th round, I'm drawing 7 cards and so on. The same escalation goes for victory points. So you're scoring 1 victory point, and then your victory point engine grows and you're scoring 4, and so on and so forth. And the game ends when the first person scores 50 points to win the game. This makes for some quick games. I thought Race was quick. This game, in a lot of ways, is Race for the Galaxy distilled, which I hardly thought was possible. The other games that I mentioned, Roll for the Galaxy and New Frontiers, are sort of like Race with extra things bolted on. This is the opposite. This is like a refining of Race. In some ways, I think it is a worse game than Race because it does go so fast. Most games don't last more than like 5 or 6 rounds, which sort of harkens to other Lehman game Res Arcana, which lasts around the same. Arcana, you say Babel, I say Babel, you say Arcana, I say Arcana. So like that game, like Res Arcana, Arcana.
I was just looking out for you.
I appreciate that. No, I appreciate that. The game is quite short, and so there is the luck of the card draw and the chance that your opponent somehow draws into an amazing combo of cards, and you don't really have anything that you can do about it. So before you know it, the game's over and you've lost. Speaking of Res Arcana real quick, while this game has, again, the same short number of rounds like Res has always felt like an ultra efficiency game to me. Like you need to make sure your engine is going to eke out just enough points to get you over the line ASAP. It doesn't feel grindy, but you're sort of working out every little bit in Res Arcana just to get to like the 10 points, I believe, is the threshold to win. So Jump Drive is, again, similar in the length, 5 or 6 rounds, but it's 5 or 6 rounds of explosions. It's like bang, bang, you're getting bigger and bigger and stronger and stronger. It's great. I love that feeling about it. It sort of, again, sucks when you're on the losing side of that, but even then, it's really fun to see your round-to-round card draw and victory point scoring go from like 0 to 1 to 4 to all of a sudden you're getting 10 cards in a round or 19 cards in a round, and you're just getting these incredible like growth in a very, very short amount of time. And it's all over in less than 10 minutes. It's a super fast game. And that's not to mention, which I haven't even touched on, all the powers that the cards grant once in their tableau. The cards have victory points and they have income values, but a lot of the cards, most of the cards, in fact, will have other things that will change the way you play and give you powers, which will accentuate your game. So that is Jump Drive by Tom Lehman and Rio Grande Games. Easily my second favorite of the Galaxy, quote-unquote, games. And one that this is a game that I feel like I could play anytime because it's just so quick and it gives you that little endorphin rush of like seeing your thing grow super fast. So really, really like Jump Drive.
It is, I feel like getting sort of a groundswell of more recent support. I don't know if maybe it was added to BGA more recently.
I think
so. And there's also, I believe, an expansion coming in this year. And also the thing you forgot, Mark, is that it's actually a redo of a different game that's now been ported into the universe. So it's another Tom Lehman card game called The City.
Okay.
I know a lot about these things, Mark.
How come we're not playing this?
Well, because I played The City and wasn't interested in it. But it sounds like it's essentially Race for the Galaxy without the whole pick what action you want to take, right? And yeah. I really want to play this. Do you have it or are you BGAing this?
Both. But I mean, like BGA games are like 5 minutes. They're so fast.
Yeah, I play games in real life. So it's like sort of like the difference between. Well, no, I can't say that on the podcast. There's going to be a masturbation joke, but I think we probably should stop there.
Sure.
But maybe. No, I'm super stoked. Like little bitty card games like this, Tom Lehman, a master of it. Res Arcana, for whatever reason, just didn't do it for me, even though I know it does it for a lot of people. So I'd be hopeful that this one would be a super fun one, and I'm sure Christina would like it as well.
Yeah, I like Res Arcana, but it's just like you're trying to find every single conversion to get that stuff, to get your points, and that feels very high pressure, very like, just get over the line as fast as you can, while this is just like, boom, boom, boom. Things are getting bigger and more powerful, and you're again drawing like one card, and you have a really small hand at the beginning of the game, and then all of a sudden you're drawing 19 cards, and you can like pick whatever you want to do. It's really fun.
Cool. Okay, so before we move on, just a reminder that we are currently in Las Vegas for Dice Tower West.
Right now?
Right now, as you're listening to this.
I mean, I literally am. But
at Mark's place.
Speaking of Las Vegas and Dice Tower West and my place, I don't know if you can see what's going on behind my shoulder there, Neelan. This is
if that is a color-coded bedspread for me, then I am loving it.
Yeah, this is currently my sort of office, but by the time you're listening to this will be Neelan Central, and we have set up an orange bed for Neelan.
Oh my God.
That's incredible.
We're going all out.
Tours for the patrons.
Yeah,
right.
Come see Neelan's bedroom. Wait, no, hang on.
That's
not
weird.
Wait, sorry. Didn't
Change
mean
that,
how
deep
that
in
sounded.
that voice.
Don't
Keep
mean how that
That
sounded.
one's going in the permanent record.
That's right. We're gonna
Wow, I
leave
can't
that in
believe you
triple.
walked into that.
Wow, great. I'm going to prison. If you are also here at the convention, come say, hey, we're going to be on the floor. We're going to be playing games. You should be able to see us by our ridiculously on-brand hoodies and clothing. If you find us, just say, hey, we'll play a game with you. I mean, that's what we're there to do. So don't feel shy, even if you just want to say hello and.
And patrons should have long ago received an email from us about a patron get-together we're having at my place. We had one last year, which was fantastic. And again, not only the highlight of the convention for me, but one of the highlights of my whole gaming year. And so we're doing it again, even bigger, even badder, hopefully. So
how would you rank it on a scale of like birth of your first child?
That's a 1. What's a 10? I would, on that scale, I would go like a 1.5. But yeah, no, that was super fun. We're trying to make this one super fun. So if you're a patron, I mean, in your Dice Tower, check your email. You missed something about 2 weeks ago.
And yeah, we can't wait to see you all if you're here. Okay, let's get right into it. It is time. You have sent us all of your submission. You've sent us your favorite games. We have compiled the data into the Board Game Barrage Listener Top 20 Games of All Time. Bum, bum, bum. We update this list every year based on the entries that you send us, and let's talk a little bit about how that works. I made some very specific instructions on the forums about how to submit your game names, and there were still people with typos and years in their name, and very helpful edition numbers, and Brass Birmingham English Retail Edition, Castles of Burgundy, Ravensburger English/French Edition, as if this was a math trade.
I've taught them too well.
There were about 7 different variations of the crew that made their way into that list.
Wow, that's impressive.
Yeah, I thought there were only two.
But yeah, I think it's definitely worth talking about some of the housekeeping in this, because, you know, there's a lot that goes into collating that data. And kind of the summary I want to say is that if the game has multiple versions, multiple editions, so I kind of gave those games the benefit of the doubt. So say something like a Twilight Imperium. Even if you specified Twilight Imperium 3rd edition, I believe that you really, really love 3rd edition. I counted it as Twilight Imperium. The one major exception to this, and the one that's actually probably going to be the most contentious, is Brass. Every year we have a number of people that just put Brass on their list.
See, you know what's going on? No, wait, hold on a second. You know what's going on? Nealon has been listening to all this stuff about Brass versus Gloomhaven on the BGG Top 100, and he's trying to retroactively fight back for Gloomhaven by splitting the Brass vote. This is uncalled for.
That's exactly it. So wherever possible, whenever people mention Brass, the thing I had to do, and you guys tell me if I'm wrong in this, like I tend to steer towards the most popular version, with the exception of Brass, because Brass has a version that was named Brass for many, many, many years. So I have to assume that people mean Brass Lancashire if they don't specify.
I think that's
Brass
fair.
Birmingham.
I think that's fair.
So that's what I did. So votes for Brass count for Brass Lancashire, and every version of Exit counts for Exit the game.
Nealon's rules. Yeah. If you want to change them, you can tabulate the data yourselves.
Exactly. But okay, let's get right into it. So let's start at number 20. In terms of a process, like, I'm not going to go into the details of like the formula or how these scores get assigned.
That's proprietary.
Trust me. Yeah, exactly. There's proprietary BGB knowledge that is held under lock and key by PricewaterhouseCoopers. And
I like that reference.
Thank you. I'm going to mention the score for these just so that there's some reference in terms of what is the score is for something at number 20 versus number 1, but don't think too hard about what that score might mean except a numerical value. So before we get to that, any change that you two are expecting, like anything that you think is going to be a high riser or something that wasn't on the list last year?
I think that number 1 is going to stay number 1. I'm not going to spoil anything for those who don't know. As far as high risers, what is... Oh, you know what? I wonder if Ark Nova cracks in there. I bet Ark Nova is somewhere in the bottom half. What do you think, Kellen, in terms of new games?
I'm trying to find the last couple of lists. Okay, I found it. What may have changed? I don't know. I'm always disappointed. That's all I'll say. Like it starts at disappointed. Number 1 has not changed. Yeah, I'm aligned. Ark Nova. Big riser, yeah?
Yeah, it was on the list last time, but it's been so hot, I think maybe it cracks I'd say somewhere between 15 and 20. Agricola was 11 last year. I'm hoping it gets top half now that I've added it to my top 10, and therefore the mark factor.
Your influence. Yeah, we hadn't considered the mark factor. Listen here, guys. We found the guy who discovered Agricola, and it's Mark, and the year's 2023.
One more thing I will say is we had twice as many people submit as last year. So this is definitely more meaningful data.
That's cool.
2 baker's dozens.
Yeah, exactly. And with that comes like some fun changes. Let's start with what is not a change per se. This was on our list last year, but it's dropped a fair bit. This is Terraforming Mars.
All right, I can get behind this.
That was number 14 on the list last year. It's now number 20.
I like that.
It has a score of 350.
It's like, I still haven't played it, so I feel like I can't say anything. But obviously, it's been replaced by Ark Nova, and obviously, according to Mike Delicious, it's been replaced by Earth. So I look forward to Earth next year being on the list.
That's a Delicio factor. That's probably even more profound than the mark factor.
Let's jump up to number 19. So number 19 and 18 actually have the same score. So this is a good opportunity to talk a little bit about one of the little bits of fudging I do when it comes to these scores, which is there is a way that you can compensate for games that appear a lot but in the lower half of the list versus games that just appear seldom but near the top. Because if you think about it, like, in the grand scheme of board games, number 20 is not that different from number 1, but you have to account for people's preferences. Like, if a lot of people put number 1, you have to, like, weight that. So you can blur those scores in different ways. But however you do that blurring, these two games still, through some sheer magic mathematical coincidence, end up netting at the same score. So number 19 and number 18 combined...
It's a double crossover.
Yeah, right. Not exactly, but sure. Are Food Chain Magnate and Cosmic Encounter.
Oh.
Wow. They're very similar. So
Exactly. Up 2 from last year is Food Chain Magnate, and up 13 is Cosmic Encounter.
Wow.
the fans fight back. You know what I mean? Like, quality cannot, or maybe our audience has gotten younger and they're still in college when Cosmic Encounter is fun. Oh, I'm so sad. Cosmic.
You're so sad. I thought you'd be happy about that.
Yeah. Well, no, I'm happy that it's here. I'm just sad that I'm on a podcast with two people who don't like Cosmic Encounter. That's what I'm sad about. The people get it, and you two don't, no matter how we fudge the numbers.
Well, if it's any consolation, we're sad too, Colin.
I don't understand.
Okay, we're now getting into the 400 score range here at number 17.
400?
I know, 400. That is
I didn't even think
lot.
that 10 years ago, 400 would get you first place. It's incredible.
Number 17 is Wingspan.
Oh.
This is also like a new entry for the list. I unfortunately don't have more than the top 20 from last year, so I don't know where this was previously, but yeah, new entry for the list.
I'm happy to see that.
There's like sort of, and you know, you're the data man, so I bow to you, Mr. Data Man. I don't know how to interpret data. Actually, I got a book for my job called Working with Data, but I have not read it.
Did you see the author's name on that?
I hope it's not Nan, because I don't want to read anything long form written by this man. So first of all, I think it's great to have Wingspan on there, even if it is a more casual affair. My question is, did it appear on a lot of lists? And that is what is giving it the pop here. Like, so it's not no one's favorite top 10, but it's probably the most list. It's on 100 lists, the most frequent.
Yeah, that's actually interesting. I do have that data, and I was going to come back to it more at the end for like some interesting correlations with that. But I will tell you this, you're exactly right. It is in the top 10 of list appearances.
Yes.
But save that for the Data Man Delivers segment at the end.
Well, no. He's fed me like 6 of these so that I can contribute over the course of the...
Number 16, just ahead of that is Inish.
Oh, see, I'm surprised. I was expecting this to pop off the list, actually. It was at 19. I feel like led by Mark and Mark's influence, which is abundant and everywhere. Yeah, that's why Agricola is getting its 15th anniversary edition. This guy over here. I feel like the winds are changing on this one just a smidgen. Like, it's not aging quite as well as its sort of initial burst. But it's up, so I'm wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. Up 3 spots. Number 15. Drum roll, please, for brand new entry. 2022's Arc Nova.
Oh, okay. That's what I said, 15 to 20. Look at that. Mark Factor in action.
Oh, my gosh. It's like the guy who does anything and then says Mark Factor afterward, or like hashtag Mark Factor.
How do we feel about games from last year appearing on this many top 20s?
I mean, the thing is, it's like, what, number 4 now on the BGG of all time list?
Sure.
So, I mean, it's understandable. Totally understandable.
Yeah.
I mean, frankly, I like to see a new game make a push like this. Every year to have 1 or 2 games make this crazy push, because it just gives me a sort of sense of dynamism to the hobby, and just like the idea that any game can sort of blow up. I just like that idea.
See, I don't. And I actually think that BGG is like quite shrewd about allowing these lists to slide intentionally, which is to say that like BGG wins when games change on the list. Like, and we can sort of cite the recent discussions around, you know, number 1 game as a good example of that. And I think that people are emboldened when they see a game like a meteoric rise, you know, on the BGG rankings. It emboldens their own feelings, and it actually like makes it, again, I'm not telling people they don't like Arc Nova, because that would be like, you know, the first year of the podcast, Callan. But I think that it emboldens them to say, yes, this is one of the best games ever when you see it high. But then you have to remember that BGG is incentivized for things to change. That's all.
Speaking of being incentivized for things to change, another new entry onto the list. Again, I apologize, I don't know where this was last year. Dune Imperium is number
Interesting.
14.
Okay.
This is such a riser, right? Like it's like
And recently as well, right? Like this feels like a game that was loved when it came out, but is now really, really loved. Like people are talking about this all the time on the basis of, new expansions that I think are incredibly popular. But it seems like a lot of people are either coming to Dune Imperium, possibly by virtue of it getting replayed more and more with those expansions. But yeah.
Okay. I love the Dune IP, right? There's no one who loves Dune more than me. Is when you're at a board game con and you're like, oh, what did you just get done playing? And they're like, oh, I just got done playing Dune. And you're like, yeah, and you want to high five them? Like, who allied with who? Who betrayed? Who is Harkonnen? What did the Bene Gesserit? Who did they predict would win? And then the person's like, what are you talking about? I just played this deck building game, Dune Imperium, when it's preempted the original. The granddaddy, the 1979 OG as like the shorthand. That's a problem, right? We have to correct this.
Well, what do you feel when they say, oh, no, I just meant Dune Betrayal? But I think I'm surprised that you guys aren't more in alignment with me. You just like, I'm on a roll, don't like agree and amplify.
No, I think that there is some value in like, hey, let's get game titles right to some extent of just like, hey, let's make sure that we're talking about the same game here, especially like in the context of something that is like, 30 years older than the game that we're talking about. And also it's not entirely out of vogue. It's not like this is a game that like, was lost to time. Very popular reprints in the last few years as well. I did look it up out of interest, Callan. Number 115, just so you know, is OG Dune.
That doesn't surprise me. And that's the trap, right? Is the relative like quality of Dune. Like Dune Imperium, like a game that has a solo mode and a game that you can play every third Tuesday and is on BGA is going to appear on more lists than a game that demands 6 people and a variable length of 2 to 5 hours. So it's hard, but yeah, interesting.
And Dune Imperium is a higher ranked game, so maybe it is the Dune now.
Yeah, that's what we've just been talking about for 2 minutes. I like Dune Imperium. I like how fighty it is for being a popular game. Like that's a little unusual. It's a little long.
Yeah, for a game that is deck builder / worker placement hybrid, it being as interactive as it is definitely a plus. Let's move on to number 13. This is Scythe.
Wow, so Scythe actually went up. I would not have guessed that.
Yeah, that also does surprise me because I don't know that I feel like Scythe has had a massive downslide per se, but this could just be similar to the Wingspan effect. More people showing up that have Scythe on their list, perhaps.
There's something like the exponential effect of evergreen titles, right? And just these titles that just sort of like, you can't even fathom the difference in sales between a game like Inish and Scythe.
Right.
Like games that are relatively similar, quote unquote, all things being considered within the hobby. And then all of these publishers are looking for evergreens that go from print runs of 10,000 to selling millions of copies of the game. And so there's sort of that pointy end of it that I think Scythe is probably in. But that is surprising to me too, Neil. And like in the exact same way that you're saying, I would expect this to slowly go down over time in the zeitgeist. Though now we have Scythe 2 coming in, so that's exciting.
We'll see what that shows up next year. Okay, next, in what will henceforth be referred to as the Mark effect, Agricola has slipped down one place.
What? That's not the Mark factor. The Mark factor is supposed to be the other way. There better be Biblios coming up soon, or I'm going to feel real...
#Mark factor.
Feel real bad about the Mark factor. That's a shame. I don't know what to tell people. This is a great game. Why is it going down the list?
Agricola
Scythe
is
going
game.
up. Agricola's going down. What world are we in?
It's like, who do the people like better? Like someone who's championed Agricola for 5 years running, in our top 50 games of all time, or the guy who shows up in 2023 saying, Agricola is my second favorite game ever, #Mark factor.
So you're saying the 5 years of Kellen factor have overwhelmed the Mark factor, and that's why the game went down?
I'm saying there's a little bit of reliability, right, that people prefer. They know what they're going to get when I start speaking. With you...
A wild card. Anything can come out of this mouth.
That's what I'm saying.
I got you.
Okay, we've now passed the 500 score threshold. I know. It's heating up here.
I'm actually getting a little
This is for a
shaky
reason. This will become very relevant as we get towards the top of the list. But anyway, this is slipping down a lot It was number 6 last year. Is now number 11. That is Great Western Trail.
Well, Argentina. Buzz.
Maybe. Yeah. Or at least even just a little bit apropos based on what I was saying, which is say that maybe it just was never that good.
Oh, so there's a Nealon factor.
yeah, exactly.
Okay, the Nealon factor is that he talked about it on this episode, Mark.
Yeah, exactly. I was
crazy.
tabulating those votes between like record and now, and wow, I just watched it drop. It was wild.
Yeah, there's something to be said about Nealon being in charge of this data and the game that he doesn't like on this that he's announced he doesn't like suddenly dropping. So the Nealon factor may be like...
Yeah, that's that fudge
right.
factor I was talking about. I just move things where I want them.
This doesn't surprise me, to be honest, actually.
And actually, I don't know, though. I was going to say that I could have seen it either way based on like the second edition coming out. But yeah, I don't know. I wonder what has changed.
It's like more choice, right? Like you guys kind of soured a little on Marco Polo when Marco Polo 2 came out, and it's almost like little variants. Were there any votes for the new one, Argentina?
That's a good question. Let me just check that real quick. No, I guess that makes sense. It's literally brand new. I think it's like only out this week.
I think people have been playing it into last year, but probably more like content creators.
But yeah, maybe there is also just something to people now having revisited it because of the second edition, it adjusting based on stuff that's come out, since it was like hot in their minds, I guess. Okay, number 10. This is holding its spot from last year. Number 10 is Race for the Galaxy.
Mark factor. I'm glad this game is as high as it is. This is a game that feels like it might be ripe for falling because of how old it is, and it's a little, again, difficult to first learn, so it feels ripe for dropping, but I'm glad it's held steady.
I can't remember who I'm quoting, but card games are better than board games.
I think you're quoting yourself.
No, I don't. Oh, someone.
You can say someone important. Number 9 is going to be, well, let me just check real quick. Number 9 is slipping down one spot. Unfortunately for Kellen, that is Innovation.
Kellen factor.
Okay. What we decided last year, and what we will reiterate for new listeners, is that this is the largest differential between its rank on BGG and its rank in our listener results, meaning #Kellen factor is real. Or Christina factor, actually, if we probably want to ascribe it to anyone. The blue tank is the best tank, and we get told that over and over again in comments on things.
Here's the one that really I was confused by. I mean, maybe not that dramatic. It's hard to say in the context of just a few spots, but this is up 4 spots. Feast for Odin. Very happy that it's up 4 spots, but I don't know what could have motivated that in the intervening time. I guess BGA implementation is the only thing I can think of, but it doesn't have the Norwegians.
I think there's some trailing factor too, to like people getting around to it. Because it's sort of like, I have Agricola, I have Caverna, do I need to get the latest Uwe? And then you try it and you're like, oh, this is actually better than that Uwe. I can just see there being a sort of trailing effect to it, but maybe BGA is the number one factor with that as a secondary factor.
Number 7 is up 2 spots from number 9 to number 7. That is The Castles of Burgundy by Stefan Feld.
This is probably on account of the delightful minis version that is being put out by Awaken Realms.
Is it by Awaken Realms? I forgot.
I don't know why you're laughing.
That's crazy. This is a surprise to me, frankly. I thought this would drop a couple spots. I knew it'd stay in the top 20, but I thought it would go to high teens.
Number 6 is down 1 spot. That is Concordia.
Okay. Yeah, this is a stalwart in the top 10. This was number 1 a couple years ago, right?
I think that's right. Like, I want to say that it was number 1 when we first started doing the list 2 years ago, so in 2021. Yeah. Yes, that's right. So yeah, it's definitely been slowly sliding down the list, but yeah, still holding strong in the top 10 for sure.
It's actually interesting. You could do the reverse, which is like, what games are on the listeners' top 20 games that are not in ours? And I think Concordia could be the biggest discrepancy between our list and
that's
the
probably
listener.
True. Yeah.
So they don't agree with us, and we don't agree with you.
Number 5 is up 2 spots. That is Gloomhaven.
Okay.
We're now in the 600s for what it's worth with Concordia and Gloomhaven, a score of 600. Gloomhaven, I think, in terms of the data collection side of it, that's interesting, is Jaws of the Lion was represented multiple times, but I thought that was distinct enough from Gloomhaven to keep separate. So this does not count Jaws of the Lion vote.
I would imagine also, and again, you're going to get this in the Dataman delivery section, but I assume this is one where it wasn't on many lists, but it was high on the list it was on, I would assume.
That is exactly the case, Mark. I have what is effectively the ranking of how many people put it on the list versus its final score, and Gloomhaven is one of the biggest performers. So the people that like Gloomhaven really, really like Gloomhaven and have it high up on their list.
Wait until next year with the brass Birmingham fans start voting. Gloomhaven is number 100.
Number 4 on the list is Root.
So holding at the spot it was last year. Yeah, it feels to me now that we're going to get close to the same top 4.
Oh, with over double the respondents.
Yeah, that is interesting.
For sure.
Root is interesting as an evergreen title, right? Like, I think about it like Twilight Imperium for Euroheads to some extent, which I know is not exactly right, but you wonder what the distribution for Root looks like in 5 years, or if they make like a Root second edition at some point and then like redo the whole thing, because it sort of starts bursting at the seams with the amount of like factions that keep coming out. But it's definitely like their cash cow, so it'll be interesting to see that evolve as we keep moving. And also the Exile and Partisans deck is better than the OG deck. Okay, thank you. Glad we all agree on that.
Number 3 is holding the exact same spot from last year, and I kind of want to stress that now these scores started really jump, and this is kind of the reason I'm mentioning them at all. We go from Root being in the low 700s to Hansa to
Teutonica. Oh, wait, Neelan. What's the password to get into the club?
Is it Hansa to Teutonica?
You're in. You made
Thank you.
So 20 was 350, right? Something in the 350 score?
Yeah, so 350 was enough to break into the top 20. Now that we're in the top 3, we're in the 800 plus zone with Hansa to Teutonica.
I wonder, like, do you think Hansa is 3 next year? You think it stays? I just feel like that might start slipping a little bit.
Again, it's the listenership.
Yeah.
First of all, amazing game.
For sure.
Second of all, it's ranked incredibly highly by, I would say, arguably, the 3 best board game podcasts, which is So Very Wrong About Games, Shut Up and Sit Down, and Board Game Barrage, us, the 4 of us.
Arguably.
There's a lot of arguablys needed, asterisk, however you want. I think there's a convergence there of everyone wants to play it, everyone wants to get it. You know, you had the big box that came out, the new edition. I just think it's got the same Concordia factor, except we also all really love it.
Totally. And I think that big box edition can't be shortchanged either, because it's like you have a classic game in an incredible new, vibrant form.
Yeah.
You know, which I think is the reason a lot of these games tend to backslide, is just because they get less and less appealing over time. But if you put out an edition as excellent as Teutonica Big Box is, then that makes a huge difference for sure. Okay, we now jump up 150 points to get to number 2. So the wild thing as we get into the top 3 is that like they get more and more convincing. Number 2 is
Brass.
It's got to be Spirit Island.
It's got to be Spirit Island, really?
Spirit Island.
What is it?
It's Spirit Island.
Because of his dramatic pause, not because of anything that I know about the data.
That's not cool. You shouldn't like try to outthink it. You should just go with your gut. You're trying to like interpret how Neelan's saying it. That shocks me. Even with it going to number 1 now, that does shock me.
So yeah, I guess so that we can talk about this all fully. Number 1 is Brass Birmingham.
So what is the score difference between 1 and 2?
So it's about another 150 leap from Spirit Island to Brass Birmingham. It's a pretty big gulf.
How many people have Spirit Island on their list? Versus
That's where
Brass
this gets
Birmingham?
interesting. It's exceedingly close. Spirit Island only has one more person that submitted it than Brass Birmingham.
Okay.
So it comes to the difference of how highly it was ranked on people's lists.
This really surprised me. I mean, even though there's just a very little bit change on the top 4, the fact that Brass has jumped Spirit Island, I wonder how much of that is attributable to the fact that it's number 1 on BGG now. I wouldn't guess it's that much. Would you? Would you think it's that strongly?
I mean, possibly. Like, I guess there's probably some like unconscious bias, just like as you're sending in this list of just like, oh yeah, people obviously seem to like Brass.
It's number 1, yeah.
Maybe. I don't know. I don't want to like suggest that is that big of a factor, but like, yeah, it's obviously similar factors that led to its rise on BGG, right?
Yeah. Interesting. That's very, very interesting to me. Huh.
And there's not that big of a difference between Birmingham and Lancashire, right? Like it's closer to like the Great Western Trail like variants. Like I wonder if you put them together, that would only make it go up even more.
Absolutely, yeah. It would just
based
be
on
more,
your fudge numbers.
Exactly, a more compelling lead. Yeah, Brass Lancashire was 65th overall, and again, that factors in everyone that just wrote Brass. So, yeah, it's quite a bit of a gap between Lancashire and Birmingham still.
I think that new edition just kills it, right? It's like so pretty. You got the iron clays. You've got a stone cold classic game. But it is intriguing to me, honestly, that it even sits at number one. It's surprising to me on BGG and here, like in both places.
Right.
Yeah, I'm with you. As much as I love it, it does surprise me.
So just a little bits of like some interesting data here. I'm curious if you guys...
This is the data man's delivery section.
In terms of those games that are near the tops, like Spirit Island and Brass Birmingham are actually tied in this stat, but what percentage of our audience had one of those games on their list?
Had either Spirit or Brass Birmingham on the list?
The percentage is the same for both of them.
Oh, okay, I gotcha. I would say, God, I don't know how off I'm going to be. I'd say 40.
I was going to say 20.
Okay.
It's basically 30. 29.
No, not basically 30. It's 29. Closer to... Not basically 30. That's a...
But that's pretty funny that it was like almost pretty much slap bang in the middle. But yeah, 29% of people had Spirit Island on the list. 29% of people had Brass Birmingham on the list.
Huh.
That just goes to show like how many total games were submitted.
There were 1,166 different games. Yeah, different titles. Yeah. Okay, one more little thing. Something that I was alluding to earlier is kind of this sort of differential statistic, which is what is the difference between its ranking based on appearance number and its ranking based on score. So if this is a positive number, these people really like this game. They had it ranked very highly. If this is a negative number, it appeared on a lot of lists, but probably like low down. So something we alluded to earlier, Wingspan is a good example of that latter example. Appeared on a lot of lists, but not necessarily very, very high up. What is, on the top 20, the highest performer, the best positive number? People, if this appeared on lists, it was relatively few, but with a huge bias.
I said it earlier, but I'm going to say Gloomhaven.
Gloomhaven is second.
What's number one? Oh, I really want to know. Could it be Innovation? No.
Innovation is third.
Okay.
Wow.
Well,
Third?
it's tied for a couple of things at third. So yeah, tied for third are Innovation, Dune Imperium, and Arc Nova.
I think I know what it is.
By a mile, Cosmic Encounter.
Oh, Cosmic Encounter.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
Relatively
very high
few
peaks.
appearances, but people loved it if it appeared on their list.
And listen, that is the list. Like, I don't know what dumb title you gave it. That's the passion list.
Yeah,
right?
that's it.
Like, we
That's
should
very
throw away the list that Wingspan is on and just use the passion list. And I mean this semi-sincerely, which is always the twist. That's the Kellen twist. # Kellen factor. You never know what I'm saying, I mean it or not. And that is I don't care. I honestly don't care about people's 20th favorite board game, but I do care about their top like 3 and those people who are screaming, "You idiots, it's Cosmic Encounter." So that's the passion list, Neelan, and I would encourage you to seek out more of that in your life.
That's very interesting.
Before we get into like some of the fun little stats we do, like, you know, how people rank relative to us and that sort of thing, I did have some just like fun little typos that made me laugh in the hours that I was doing this section. Here are my Neelan's favorite typos. The classic "through the dessert." I'm the Hall of the Mountain King.
Okay.
And I have to assume this was a joke, but I want to emphasize it's not appreciated when I'm trying to use the data. But the quacks of Quentin Smith.
Did you wait? Does that count? That was Quacks of Quedlinburg?
Yeah.
Yes, I re-edited it to Quacks of Quedlinburg.
That's a stretch. What? That's an assumption.
Yeah, what else could they have possibly meant? I guess. Okay. Something else that I thought was interesting here is the games that were picked as their number one games. What game was most picked as number one?
I mean, the obvious guess is one of the top 2. I would say, I'm going to say Curveball Route. I'm going to say Curveball.
Exactly right.
Exactly right. Kellen, what was that he said? From the data man himself?
I heard him say exactly right.
Yeah. Good.
Yeah, despite being number 4 on the list, Root has the most number 1 picks.
You should write that down, Mark. You know,
And interestingly,
no, Neelan, sorry, this is important.
Yeah, we have to talk about this.
What I do at work, Mark, is anytime someone says something like nice to me that I could use in my performance review, like save it in a folder You know what I mean? So at the end of the year, I pull it out, and things that people say. And so my guess is for you that you haven't had one of these in the last little bit. Yeah, it's been a long time. So just start a new note, notepad.exe, and just say, Neelan told me I was exactly right.
Can I say Neelan as Data Man said?
Yes. And then when you're down or you're having a bad day, do you know what you do?
Pop that open.
And how many times are you going to read it?
At least 3 times. Once just to read it, to remember it. Second time to enjoy it. And then third time really luxuriate over it.
Yeah. And then just let us know how often you check that.
Yeah.
All right. Okay.
I'll keep a counter.
That's okay.
One more little quick aside on that stat. Sorry, I was ignoring everything you guys were saying.
What?
So yeah, in the top 5 of games picked as number 1, you got Root, you got Spirit Island, Brass, Birmingham, and Gloomhaven. The other surprising number 5, 5th most picked as number 1 game is
Dominion? I don't know.
Innovation.
No, not on the list. Oh, Innovation. Interesting.
Yeah. In fact, sorry, not even the 4th most picked as number 1.
Wow.
Is Innovation. Okay. So just to end this out, a few little call outs to people that we kind of felt, people that I felt based on their submissions were most aligned with the people here. Kellen, your best fans, your number 1 most influenced peoples are Alice.
I love you.
Alex Y/General Jack.
I love you.
W.A. Wilson.
I love you.
Lynn Dawson.
I love you. Actually, I really love Wa Wilson.
That's true.
I know him IRL.
Lynn Dawson is coming to the Patreon game night.
Oh, I'm excited.
And the number 1 most aligned is Blanky.
Oh, in the Discord?
I recognize the name. I believe they're in the Discord, yeah.
Okay. If you're all in the Discord, let's start a private group chat. We'll call it the Red. Actually, no. Things with Red and Army.
The Red Room?
Right.
Yeah, we'll work on the name. We're going to have a good time. We're going to have our own separate con without these people. Thank you.
Most aligned with Mark are Shane. General Jack again.
General Jack. Double crossover. Main Kellen.
Philip Schaefer, Lucky Lukey, and Michael are tied for number 1.
Michael?
Just Michael.
You can't give me more than Michael. Can you give me your first letter of
That's
last
what they
name?
submitted. That's all I've got.
Michael? Michael's number 1?
Michael's number 1. Well, Michael, Lucky
sucks.
Lukey, and Philip Schaefer are tied for
You can't give me any more from Michael than just Michael?
That's it.
Oh,
Don't give him their
Michael,
information.
please reach out to me if you know who you are, because I don't know anything
That's
about you.
PPI, private personal information, cannot be given to Mark.
I can't even get a Michael J or Michael L or whatever. Just Michael. I got to search the world
wanted
for
to
Michael.
remain anonymous.
Michael Jordan, Michael Lewis.
Yeah.
Any of them. The top 5 Neil and the Aligned folks are Frank and Sam, Longtime Sunshine, our friend Daniel, C. Majex, Steponis, and Jacob Wrestled God.
You got Jacob Wrestled God, I get Michael. Exactly. That's so wrong.
And then people most aligned with Board Game Barrage at whole, so people who had games that appeared on our combined lists, are the top 5.
Sarah.
S. Peter 22, Blanky again, Waffle, Frank and Sam, and Shane.
Shane is number 1?
Shane is number 1.
Shane was on my list too. Look at that. Shane.
I hope it's not my coworker, Shane. I hope he doesn't listen to this podcast.
Which of the 3 of us most represented the listener's taste?
Neelan.
Correct. Who was second?
Mark.
Callan.
Oh.
I like to zig when you guys zag. You know what I mean? You guys go down this road. Me and Michael are going over here. Excuse us, but we're going to be over here.
Yeah, you and Michael.
Yeah.
And that is all I have.
Well, the most important thing, how's Biblios doing? How are we moving up? Where are we?
Do you remember where it was last year?
No, I don't.
Okay, let me do that for you. Biblios is 93.
All right, top 100. Top 100 games of all time. We'll take it.
I think that's going to do it. Thank you all so much for submitting all of your lists. We obviously, definitely, more so than ever, couldn't have done this without all of you. If you were compiling and ranking these lists for the first time, thank you so much for doing that, for taking that effort. And thank you for being a part of this audience and sharing your love of games with us.
Yeah, I mean, this was a blast. I really enjoyed going over these and getting an insight into our listener tastes. It's really interesting.
It's definitely one of the highlights of my year by a long way. Like, as much as I complain about like the collation side of it, and we're going to probably have some very strict rules next year. It's a joy to do,
how would
man.
you rank it? You said as a highlight of your year in comparison to like the birth of your first child.
Yeah, on that list, it's
That'd
like
be a good
it's a
one.
1.5.
Fair enough.
Fourth and fifth child, well, I don't know. We can go from there.
And finally, just to counteract how I've behaved, thank you, Neelan, for putting this together.
Thank you. You're too kind. No, it's genuinely a pleasure. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
What do you
No,
think?
no.
I didn't do anything. Or are you thanking them?
Well, everyone really. Both you for being here and them for doing all that they do. Blessing me with all these incredible spelling mistakes and so on.
And puns.
And puns. Thank you so much for listening. We always love hearing what you think about these lists, obviously. So chime off in the Discord, in the podcast channel. Tell us about what you think you should have seen in this, what you were expecting, what you're surprised about. That's at boardgamebarrage.com/Discord. Otherwise, you can catch us on all of our social media. And as always, thank you to Heart Society for our intro and outro music, What's on Your Mind, Kid. Bye-bye, everybody.
Goodbye.
Bye.
There's some fun changes there, which I'm excited to have you all guessing about as we
Dozens
get through
of people. We were combing through dozens of people's data, right?
Exactly. Dozens and dozens and dozens of people. But yeah, dozens and dozens and dozens of people.
A baker's dozen.
I don't know why I repeated that.
Neelan, what's a baker's dozen?
A baker's dozen is 13 in case God wants a bit of bread.
What?
I don't know.
What is he talking about?
Yeah, it's just so you have like a little extra. The baker slips you a little extra.
Oh, it's for the baker, maybe.
You leave one
No,
out
the
on
baker
a
has
plate.
a ton of it. Why does the baker need one?
I don't know. Why is he making
He's
extra
nice.
bread?
He's giving you an extra one. Why are you accusing the baker of stealing his own stuff when he has loaves of bread all over the place? He doesn't need a 13th loaf.
Look, if I order a dozen rolls, I better get exactly 12. That's all I'm saying.
What? You don't want a 13? Little under the table 13th?
That's a little bit suspicious. I don't know what the baker's been doing with that 13th roll.
What is it? Okay. Is God Santa Claus in this scenario?
Yes.
Because you leave him
Exactly
cookies?
so.
Okay.
That is all coming up later in the episode, though.